Welcome to this online course where we will see some basic features regarding Microsoft Excel. This is a software you have included as CEU students and you can download from online campus. And here we will first take an approach on the basic concepts you must take into account to start working with Excel. Excel is a spreadsheet where you can see that first of all we have a tabulated grid here where you have the coordinates defined by both the columns that start here with the A and the rows that start with the row number 1, 2, 3, and so on. So here is where we introduce the data we are going to work with. On the other hand, on top of the screen here, you have a ribbon where you have different options to work with Excel. Okay, so first of all, let's see how we can spot cell. A cell is defined by two coordinates that will be given by both the column and the row. So for instance, here, the coordinate for this cell will be D8. Okay, so in the end, a cell is an intersection from two coordinates that we are going to take into consideration. Okay, so once we have seen the two basic elements that we have here on the Excel software, we will see how to introduce data in our Excel file. Okay, so some basic data we can introduce are numbers. For instance, 23. Okay, I have introduced in this case the number 23 in the cell D6. Okay, but I can also introduce names. Okay, so here I can type John, okay? And if you pay attention, you will see that when we are introducing a word, it is on the left of the cell, while when we are introducing a number, it is on the far right of the cell, okay? So Excel is very useful when working with data we gather from other sources, and it is a soft, software tool that is commonly used to work with data from any other third-party databases. Okay, so let's see how we can organize the data we are working here. Suppose that I'm going to use several names, okay, and how I can introduce here several values for those names, okay. So here I have John with 23, Paul with 12, and Mary with the number 36. So here I have introduced data and I have linked each name regarding each individual with number. These numbers could be, for instance, online purchases, okay, referred to the last week and the amount of money they have spent. For instance, suppose that we are working with euros, okay, so in that case, has spent 23 euros, Paul 12 euros, and Mary 36 euros, okay. So here we can introduce data, okay, and we can start working with this data. How can we work with data? Well, suppose that I want to find out or I want to compute the total amount that has been spent by those three individuals. In this case, it would be necessary to introduce a formula. We will start with a very simple formula, okay? So here, to introduce a formula, first I will choose in which cell I want to obtain the result of introducing this formula. So for instance, if I want to arrange the sum of the three quantities I have here, first thing I must consider is to introduce equal, okay? And then once I have introduced equal, I will need to select which cells I want to consider when computing the sum of all those quantities. So here we have the cell D6, so I could type D6 and then I would introduce the sum operator, okay? Next, I would repeat. The next one would be D7, but look how I can also introduce the coordinate for the cell that I want to consider in my calculation by just clicking with the mouse, okay, on the cell I want to consider. So here we have D7. And next I would introduce the last cell I want to compute in this sum, and it would be D8. Okay, so that would be plus again, and then I could both introduce it manually by typing the last cell, that is D7, or I could also click on that cell. So once I have introduced the formula, I would be able, just by clicking on enter, okay, on my keyboard, I would be able to obtain the result of the sum of those three values, okay. There is also another way to compute this result. If I delete the calculation I have already done, if I delete this operation, it would be also possible just to consider those three cells by spotting the first cell and then clicking on the left button and then dragging down until the last cell, that is D8. So the other way we could work for doing this sum would be just to drag down and leave one blank cell, and here on the ribbon I have the sum operator. So I would be able to, just by clicking here in the sum operator, okay, to obtain the same result. Okay, so those are some basic concepts that I can start using with calculations. So, okay, and here, if you see what I have here in the function bar, here I have the sum from the cell D6 until the cell D8. Okay, so once we have seen these basic operations, we could also compute some other simple operations. Suppose that now I have only two values. Okay, I have John and Paul, and here I want to obtain the difference between the amount that John spent during last week on online purchases, and I want to subtract from 23 the amount that Paul spent during last week. So I will repeat this operation. I would start with equal, and that would be 23 minus D7, okay? And here I would have the difference, okay? I could also repeat this operation. Suppose that I want to divide, would be the same. It would be D7. I would use the bar, okay? That would be D7 divided by D6, or D7 over D6, okay? I would obtain here the quotient between 23 and 12. And if I want to multiply both, I would use asterisk, okay? In that case, here I would have the product of obtained after multiplying 23 by 12. Okay, so here in Excel, it is also important to know how to treat the data we are working with. In that case, here on top of the screen, I have the option of clicking on format. On format, the first option I have is cells. Okay, if I click on cells, I will have here different categories. Okay, depending on how I want to work with the data I have on my spreadsheet. Okay, so in that case, I have general. Okay, but I can change to number. If I change it to number, I have different options. Okay, I could use two decimal places. I could use three, one, or zero decimal places. Let's start with two decimal places, and I can also use the thousands separator. Okay, so here you see the appearance. Okay, we would obtain, and I could also work when working with negative numbers. That is very common in finance or accounting. Okay, I could also have the option of working with red numbers. Okay, just to make a difference between black numbers and red numbers. Okay, but at the moment I will use the thousands separator and two decimals. Okay, so let's see here how it changes. Okay, suppose that instead of 23 I have 100 excuse me 1247.98. Okay, so here I would have another format for my cells, and I would change also this one, let's say 33 459.11. Okay, so here I would use another format after using the cells option as we have already seen. Okay, and I could change how the information I'm working with appears on the tabulated grid I'm using on Excel. Okay, so once I have decided to work with this format, I could also copy the format with this icon. Okay, so suppose that I want to copy this format for the result I'm obtaining. Okay, so here we would have a problem as this is a multiplication. Okay, and then I would not be able to see the number I have after doing this operation. So in that case, I would need to make the column wider just in order to see the result of this operation. Okay, so in that case, I would go to the row I'm working with, that's, excuse me, to the column I'm working with. This is the column D. And then if I'm here on the right, you see how it changes from this arrow, okay, to this cross with arrows on each side. So by clicking on the left, okay, I would be able to widen, okay, the column. Same would happen with the rows here. If I'm in the row number 8, I could also widen the row. This is not necessary at the moment, but you have the option. Okay, now once we have seen this option, we can see also how to place the numbers in the cells we are working with. For this purpose, I can work with these options I have here on top, okay, where I can align, okay, to the bottom, okay, I can also place it on top or just in the middle, okay, but I can also move it to the left, to the right, or just center the number I'm obtaining, okay. So well, those are some basic concepts that you can get familiar with because the operations we have done are very simple. And last but not least, just check that here we are working exclusively with one sheet. This is sheet number 1, but we can also consider other sheets. Okay, here's sheet number 2, sheet number 3, and here with the plus symbol we have here, we can introduce new sheets. Okay, so here we have sheet number 5. If we double click on sheet number 5, we could change the name of the sheet we are working with. For instance, sheet 7, or we could also put turnover, okay, or expenditures. Okay, so whatever we want to do, we can change even the names on the sheets I'm working with. Okay, so let's go back to the first sheet. Okay, sheet number 1, where we have done some basic operations with Excel file just for you to be more familiar on the basic concepts or the basic features we have on this spreadsheet that will be very useful, okay, because Excel is a tool that you can use for several subjects or courses, or even in your future professional life. This will be very important for you just to know how to start working with Excel file.